It happened in 1983, or maybe 1984. The factory was still new then, built only 6 or 7 years previously, occupied for only 4 to 5 years. It was a square.
Hi, welcome to Hello Bookseller. And a while ago, a lot of you watched my video on science fiction and hauntology, why we like the old covers. And I talked sort of briefly about hauntology and science fiction. And as I said, hauntology is a big, thorny subject, but this is a vinyl LP unboxing. About 8 months ago on the channel, I did a little video about a couple of hauntology labels. There's one called Ghost Box and another called Clay Pipe Music, and they're related. And this is something I bought from one of them, I think some clay pipe a while ago. This is called Adelstrop by Gilroy. And as you see, it's a cassette, and I still have a cassette player. And I bought that from the cassette shop in Bristol, which closed down only about 10-15 years ago. It was there for years and years and years. And it's very nice, and it's interesting. Hauntological music is usually kind of folky or electronic in the way of the electronica of 1970s children's SF TV shows like The Changes, Children of the Stones, that sort of thing. I'm more of a Changes guy myself. And also a little bit folky, like the sort of public information films you'd see about the Ridgeway. So there is an element of sort of nostalgia of it, of the 70s being a time which was a haunted time. And I just thought I'd unbox this. And this is a reissue of the LP version, because these labels, they do things as limited editions and they're quite collectible. There we are, that's outside the sleeve, and I just thought I'd show it to you. They usually do sort of CDs as well. Let's say all the physical media is limited. Occasionally they do reissues, but there's always downloads if that's your jam. And there we are, you see different livery to the cassette. And I'm not sure if that's different to the original. I need to take a look. I'm sure there's some fans out there screaming at me now, know this stuff. And yeah, very beautiful. I'm very nostalgic about trains. This is numbered. There we go, 87500. Simply because where I was born in South Wales, I was born at Groeswen Halt, which is a tiny hamlet, and it was called Groeswen Halt because there was a railway station there, and passenger trains stopped running in 1957, and the railway line had been put in basically to take coal from the valleys of South Wales to Newport, which was a competing port with Cardiff back in the days of the Industrial Revolution. And my father lived in the house before me. He lived there from the time he was a young boy, and my grandfather lived there before. So several generations of my family were in the house, and it was 200 years old when I lived in it. And, you know, I left home in the early 80s, so it was a very long time ago. So I have no memory of the trains running. The trains didn't actually stop running until 1965 when I was 2. And at that point, in between 57 and 65, obviously still running, and then the Beeching report came along. I don't know if you know about the Beeching report, but Beeching was a guy who was commissioned by the government to do a report into Britain's failing railways. And at that point, of course, the Conservative government were in power, and basically there's different views on this, but he was supposedly lobbied by haulage companies because roads were expanding. There were lots of people with lorry companies and what have you, and there'd been no proper investment in the railways for ages. There were still steam trains, and fundamentally what Beeching did, he closed down a massive proportion of the lines in the UK. And if you look at the old maps, and I've just put that in a black poly-lined in. I get these from Covers 33, part of my curating standard, and there's the inner sleeve, quite beautiful. And fundamentally what Beeching did was he closed down loads of the railways, and of course the Labour Party, when they got in, they'd wanted to reinvest. I think that's like a limited, yeah, there we go, that's the yeah, I think that's a download code, so don't nick that. I'll have to do it first before you can. And he was responsible really for re-isolating lots of people in Britain, and it now means that in Wales particularly, and lots of other parts of the UK, it's really difficult to get around on public transport. And it's a great shame because it was very short-sighted if you think about it, because fundamentally, you know, population went up, the roads are clogged, you know, there's sort of damage from diesel and petrol and cars and lorries and buses and what have you, and because they want to sort of cycle now. And I have mixed feelings about cycling. I think it's good for the environment, but I do think cyclists sometimes, some of them are very naughty, and you know, will ride on pavements and stuff, which I really disapprove of, because I think it's dangerous. Oh, look at that, you've got like a little press out, yeah, a little press out station to make, because it was a real place, I think, Adelstrop, and isn't that lovely? So if you've got railway interests, as Sigmund Freud would say, that's particularly nice. And anyway, fundamentally, you know, it changed my life, because if the train had been running and taking passengers, of course it stopped taking passengers, I could have nipped on the train and zipped off to Pontypridd or Caerphilly, because I lived on a mountain which was between the two, and it would have been far easier for me to get to gigs, to go out, to meet people and what have you. So I grew up isolated, and that's why I'm a sad science fiction fan, I guess. So, you know, and I didn't really think about it as a kid. I'd go down and play on the old railway line. It gradually got flooded, and there were lots of amphibians down there, frogs, toads, newts, lots of pond life, and I used to love that. And it's only later on in my life I didn't really realise what impact it had till I left home. There's a video of me walking along that old railway line. It's now called the Taff Trail. It's very overgrown. There's other mentions in my earlier hauntology videos of it. So anyway, that's Gilroy Mere Adelstrop. Very, very nice indeed. And yeah, hauntology, very, very interesting subject. Read Merlin Coverley's book of the same name. Move on then to Mark Fisher's Ghosts of My Life. You get an understanding of it, and it's very important in sort of SF terms, because really it's sort of nostalgia for nostalgia that we have now for futures which never came and futures which will never come. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Do have a look at the labels. You can have a listen to samples and what have you. It's usually quite relaxing stuff. Some people think it's bland, but that's kind of part of the point. It's a bit like the period when library music became a big thing in collecting circles and music circles. So it is quite interesting. The cassette, I say, is long gone. We'll have another quick look at the vinyl. But yeah, hauntology, there's like a meme-based thing called Scarfolk, which is a website, a map and what have you. And I'm not so keen on that, because it's more of a sort of kitsch thing, and it's sort of postmodern eclecticism, that sort of end of hauntology. But you read the real stuff and it's quite something. And you know, my friend Daniel Bristow is an academic and bookseller. He wrote a fantastic academic book about a Lacanian psychoanalysis in 2001, A Space Odyssey, because he's a huge Kubrick fan. I've been trying to get him to read Triton by Samuel R. Delany. I gave him a copy, and if he's read it yet. He says that Jacques Lacan came up with the word hauntology. Ontology is the question of what is real. It's a pun in France. And, you know, also Jacques Derrida, who the deconstructionist, who wanted to take everything apart. And these guys are instrumental in postmodern thinking, the taking apart of grand narratives, things like imperial history, what have you. But of course, it's interesting because they have to construct a narrative of their own to do that. So it is quite a good thing sometimes to look at music, and it's profoundly instrumental music that these labels do, that it's almost like narrative painting. You know, when you look at a painting, whether it's abstract or realist, it'll often have a title, and sometimes when it's an abstract painting, it'll mean everything. I mean, one of my favourite surrealist paintings is a painting by Arshile Gorky called The Liver is the Coxcomb. Even paintings are literary, so that's something to think about with hauntology, whether you can escape from narrative and whether we're haunted by it, whether we should move on from the past, or whether the past was more important. Winston Smith says to O'Brien, I'm always haunted by that bit in 1984 when the two of them meet at O'Brien's flat, and Winston and Julia think that O'Brien is part of the Brotherhood, the rebellion. And he offers them some wine which they've never seen before, and he says, shall we drink to the future or the past? And Winston Smith instantly says, to the past, and O'Brien replies, the past is more important. And of course in 1984, the rewriting of the past by Winston Smith in his Job it's really quite something. And this is another thing that ties in with my thoughts about how people saying, for example, that SF isn't relevant because most people say sci-fi now, and lots of professionals say SF. You know, we wouldn't be here without knowledge of the past, and it's quite a dangerous thing to drop the past. So anyway, so this is going to be a little nostalgic listen for me. Adelstrop by Gilroy Mia, and absolutely lovely. And as you can see, some real artistry has gone into this. And I don't get to play my records a lot because the turntable's under a mound of CDs, but it's very, very nice to have them because they're beautiful artifacts. And I think that's interesting. That's why music on vinyl has come back, even with young people, because I don't think it's as good as on CD. I think CD is superior sound quality, it's more reliable, but there's something about the iconography and the physicality and the soul and the spirit of a vinyl record. Anyway, Outlaw Bookseller signing out for now. Hope you enjoyed that. Check out Claypipe and Ghostbox. It's quite interesting stuff. Bye for now.
It happened in 1983, or maybe 1984. The factory was still new then, built only 6 or 7 years previously, occupied for only 4 to 5 years. It was a square, a warren of olive green metal, of endless clamour, 24 hours a day, as the 1,000 men who worked there did shift after shift after shift. Some worked 2 shifts, some worked a 3 shifts a day. I worked a 2 shift. A week of days followed by a week.